It is 10:30, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can I ask Board Member Balich to lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we've called the Land Use and Development meeting to order. Please take the roll.
Frankie Pretzel,
Here?
Natalie Coleman.
Here.
Julie Berkowitz. Here. Katie Deanne Schlottman.
Here.
Raquel Mitchell.
Here.
Sherry Newquist.
Here.
And Destiny Ortiz.
Here.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the February 14th Land Use and Development Committee meeting?
So moved, Mitchell. Second, Dean Schlottman.
Please take the roll.
Frankie Pretzel,
Yes?
Natalie Coleman.
Yes.
Julie Berkowitz.
Yes.
Katie Deanne Schlottman.
Yes.
Raquel Mitchell.
Yes.
Sherry Newquist.
Yes.
And Destiny Ortiz.
Yes.
Motion passes. First up, under new business. The first item is zoning case ZC 22050, Bankston Land Management LLC, owner of record. This is in Green Garden Township, 11332 West Trail Road, Monee County Board District Number 3, requesting special use permit for rural events and a special use permit for ancillary liquor services in conjunction with allowed agritourism uses. For a motion?
I'll make a motion, Newquist.
Second, Mitchell.
Motion and a second. Do we have any comments from staff on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant applied for two special use permits, as mentioned, one for rural events and another for ancillary liquor service in conjunction with the allowed agritourism uses. The applicant received two administrative temporary use permits in 2022 for the same uses with conditions. There were no objectors during the application process and no complaints while the temporary use permits were active. The property is in Green Garden Township, a little over a mile south of the village of Frankfort. The property is 94.65 acres with over 2,000 feet of lot frontage along West Raleigh Road. The property conforms to the minimum lot standards for the A1 district as it exceeds the lot area requirement of 10 acres and the lot frontage requirement of 300 feet. The proposed special use area is 30.42 acres of the full 94. Per the site plan, the applicant will install 158 20 by 9 foot parking spaces and 6 handicap accessible parking spaces to accommodate the 40 to 250 customers on average, satisfying the Will County zoning ordinance parking area design requirements. In addition, the applicant is proposing to convert the barn into an open building with tables and bring to commercial code, to convert a shed into a concession building, and to install asphalt pavement connecting the parking area to the farm. And lastly, to include multiple vendor tents. The applicant may propose construction of new buildings and will submit a permit request to the county should that day come. Per the application, the hours of operation will be 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Later, for special events between the months of May and October. Depending on the event type, the farm will have 2 to 8 employees staff. Staff recommended approval of the special use permit for rural events with 7 conditions. Staff also recommended approval of the special use permit for ancillary liquor service in conjunction with allowed agritourism uses with the following, or with 2 conditions. Of the agencies notified, Green Garden Township heard this request before the Township Plan Commission and Board. The Township stated that their desire is to not have the special use be transferable. The applicant has stated they are willing to condition the special use to keep it operating in the family. After discussion at the PZC, it was agreed that the special use be transferable to subsequent owner of the property. There were no objectors for this request, and the PZC approved both requests with the proposed conditions.
Thank you. Member Newquist.
And she answered my question. I was just going to ask about the special use, the temporary special use permits, if there were any objections. And she answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Member Berkowitz?
Thank you, Frankie. So a question for staff. If the special use is transferable and they sell the property and they want to transfer it, what are the steps? How does land use get notified of that transfer? And what is the process?
May I ask one because I'm not positive?
So to answer your question, County Board Member Berkowitz, in terms of transactions with land sales, our office usually does not get notified. With the transferability of each of these special uses, what would happen would be, should the property be sold and a new user or new owner reestablish this type of use, they would be subject to the proposed conditions that would be approved if this special use were approved for the continuation of that use.
So they would be expected to abide by the special use permit. However, we would have no record that they even exist. So is that a reason why the township may have objected to that, to having the special use permit transferable? Because that does raise a concern for me.
It's my understanding that is one of the concerns the township had. The applicants, in terms of conditioning this special use to not be transferable, wish to have it stay in the family, where that may require, the current property is under an LLC, so if it were transitioned to a different family member, it probably would be reestablished in another LLC, and coming up with a condition where all that would apply, or keeping it as simple as having the special use condition to just stay in the family would have been very difficult to enforce, because we do not define family going forward.
So if we do not allow the special use permit to be transferred, if a holder sells their property, then that new owner would approach the county and begin the process to implement a new special use permit.
Correct. So if this special use, if you were to entertain adding a condition, you would have to make a motion to add a condition that this special use not be transferable. What that would mean is the current applicant would be who has the special use. If that applicant ceases to own the property, the next owner applicant would have to come forward with a new special use permit.
Last question, can you tell me why you came into agreement that you would allow or recommend a special use permit be transferred?
As I mentioned, we found it too difficult to condition it to the request of the applicants in the sense of keeping it with the family. It does appear that the intent is to keep it within the family, so if it does go through transactions, that for ease for them, it would be to just have it run with the land, and that way going forward, if it did stay in the family, they would continue the operation. However, that being said, if they were to sell it to a different party that was not in the family, they could potentially establish or continue operating this type of use on the property.
Thank you.
Frankie, I have a quick question.
Yeah, Member Newquist.
Just for clarification, I'm now really confused, and I probably read this wrong. I thought one of the conditions was that it be not transferable.
That was a condition at the Green Garden Township Plan Commission level,
Okay,
and then they gave the recommendation to
so
us.
we can apply that, correct? We can add that. And the family was saying they didn't necessarily want to make it non-transferable, but they wanted some sort of condition to keep it in the family, which I totally understand. How do we, how do we regulate that? How do we define it? How do we, police it? So I'm willing to, if we think it's appropriate, I'm willing to amend my motion to add the special use permit, to add that it not be transferable, or if that's, something we want to do.
So my understanding is that our staff didn't recommend that because it is very difficult for us. We don't have a way of knowing when properties are transferred
right,
from one
okay.
to the other. So
Then I'm good.
now, also it's important to point out that the conditions that were laid out would then transfer those same conditions to the new owners. So they can't then go and change the whole plan of what we approved.
Right, well, and I know in a municipal situation, if someone buys the exact LLC, they don't have to reapply, but if they form their own LLC, which is usually the case, then they do have to reapply as a new company. That's what you're saying, correct?
So here, County Board Member Newquist, if it is transferable, say a new LLC forms and wants to do rural events and have ancillary liquor, they could if it's transferable with a special use. If it's non-transferable and a new LLC was formed, we would consider that special use null and void. They would have to go through a new special use process.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
I do see Mr. Kavanaugh is here from KGG. Would you like to say something?
Very, very briefly.
Please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Kavanaugh. I'm an attorney with KGG LLC. I represent the Wildflower Farm. The Wildflower Farm is basically Anna Carmine. Her father, Dave Bengston, is the owner of the land, and the land is in an LLC, which Mr. Bengston set up. The township was somewhat concerned about somebody that they didn't know, basically buying the property and then continuing this special use and with the events and the sale of alcohol. I think would have to go through a different process for getting a permit from the county and the county executive, who's the liquor commissioner, to go ahead and sell alcohol there. But the township was concerned about somebody else, which is why we suggested to the township, if it's still within the family, that's fine. And that's what we would like to see. This is an expensive process. I mean, it's not cheap to get a special use permit, especially on 32 acres. And so we were hoping that it would be approved with the provision that it's transferable within the family. Staff properly suggested they have a problem. How do we know what's family or not? All I can tell you is my client wants to, I don't know whether you saw some of the pictures. It's really a terrific, terrific site. They've done an outstanding job there. And what we're hoping is that it is transferable. Eventually, the village of Frankfort is going to come south. And eventually, unfortunately in some senses, the farm is going to be developed. It'll no longer be a rural events site. So we're asking you to approve it as it came out of the Plan Commission, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Member Mitchell.
Okay, so here's my question. If you have, okay, so once the current owners say they have a son that wants to take over this business, do they have to change the LLC? Is that the problem? I'm trying to figure out why there's a glitch in the transfer.
The landowner is the LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But if I give my land, if
If you sell your land to somebody else, you're not selling it from the LLC, you're selling it out of your LLC to somebody else.
No, what I'm saying is, the issue is with the township, is that they keep it within the family. It's
Right.
fine as long, so what I'm saying to you is, if I'm the current owner, and and my nephew wants to take over the business, right? I'm not selling it to him, he's just gonna take it over. Is that an issue? Does he have to get a new LLC? How does that,
Well,
or if I die and I leave it to my nephew, how does that?
if he doesn't own the LLC, then he can't do it. If it terminates with the current owner.
Does it have
What we
to?
wanted, and Anna again is the daughter of Daniel. It's Daniel's LLC who owns it. Anna established her own LLC, Wildflower Farm LLC, and that's who operates it.
Can I just say,
Hold on, Member Berkowitz.
Dick, is there a way for the LLC to identify who these family members may be? Because only certain people have any interest and desire to ever even do this.
Right.
Or
Or the ability to
or
do
the
it.
ability.
Yeah,
So is
Yeah.
there a way
right.
to have this identified?
Right. Well, when we file an application, we have to tell you who the owners of the LLC are. So the Bankston Land Management is Daniel, Wildflower is Anna Carmine, who is Daniel's daughter.
But if Anna were to need to retire or step back, who then would that family member be?
It could be one of the children that her children are.
So that's why I'm asking, is there a way to identify that?
I'm not sure what that is.
Does staff have any comment regarding that inquiry?
I mean, to answer the County Board Member Berkowitz's question, that's pretty much the questions we had, why we didn't condition it to be non-transferable. We couldn't figure out how we could condition naming exact family members or even define what family would be, say, in terms of the LLC. Once a different LLC takes either ownership of the land or in terms of the use, if it changes, having it non-transferable would mean that whoever that next entity is would have to go through the special use process, that special use ceases, essentially. So just to kind of save the hours of trying to figure that out with staff and everything to that extent, it was just easier to keep it transferable and have conditions that would mitigate any negative impacts we could see at this time for this type of use to continue on the property.
So can we put a requirement in there that if the special use permit is transferred, let's say Anna is raising her family and another family member steps up and creates a new LLC, can we put, with the same business plan, the only thing that changes is the name of the family member? Is there a way for the process to be done a little bit easier for the new business owner? The only thing that's really changing is the name and the person who's running the business.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you would want it non-transferable, but to have it stay somehow with the family, and I think that's where we're kind of stuck because we can't define that.
So, in my mind, it's not necessarily important who's running it. The conditions are the assurance that the intended use will continue to be met, right? So as long as the conditions are strong, which they are, does it really matter which member of this family runs this? And if they do sell it to an outside member, then it would have to be a whole new LLC and then probably, yeah,
Why do we care? Our next question,
that's kind of what I'm saying, I don't.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, our next question.
Sorry, Nicholas first. Number
So that was gonna be my point. If we, why do we, it's not, we're not really in the business of deciding who should own the property. As long as, like what Frankie is saying, as long as they're conforming to the special use conditions, is it really within our purview, if you will, to decide who should own that property? I mean, if they do sell it to an outsider, so what? I mean, that, you know, that's their business, and as long as they're complying with planning and zoning, I don't see what the issue would be.
Member Mitchell.
My question was, I'm at a loss as to why, I'm at a loss as to why we are concerned about transferring anyway. If they're gonna be the LLC on the business and they don't know who's gonna have it next, why, what's the big deal about it being transferable? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Right.
Why does it need to be transferable?
That's what our staff is saying. If there's somebody, I'll open it up.
What I'm asking right here is, why does your client want this property to be transferable?
Well, because if in the future there is development around it and somebody else wants to continue to do this, but my client doesn't, but there's a member of the family or somebody else who is interested in doing it, they'd prefer to be able to do that. If somebody would be willing to buy it, but only to be able to run events and things that are being done under this special use permit, rural events. As I said earlier, this process is not inexpensive. This process is pretty expensive, going through getting a special use permit on a 32-acre portion of the farm, getting all of the reports, paying the attorneys, all the rest of that stuff. You can see how much went into this file.
It also will make it more difficult for them to sell down the road if they wanted to, if the new owner then has to go through this process and hire the attorneys and everything else.
And I'm only talking about a small portion of the expense, because bringing that barn, which is a beautiful barn, up to commercial standards is going to be quite expensive.
Member Berkowitz?
So I think this is a beautiful project, and I want to support our agriculture base. I don't have any issues with this. However, the one thing I'm concerned about, and it has nothing to do with the business itself, is the fact that we may not know who's actually organizing or managing the business if it were to be sold. Our special use permit, if we allow it, will transfer, but we don't have any idea who that new person is. So the only concern I have is that if the special use is transferred, if the owner sells the business, I would like the county just to get a notification of that, so we can make sure our records have the current information and anything we need about who's operating that property. So is that, can we do that? Can we make sure that we have that condition in there? And that wouldn't be burdensome for the business, because it would just be one more step in the process that we don't have right now.
So, yes, County Board Member, you could motion to add that as a condition to have the applicant, should he or she sell the property, to notify the county or the land use department of such transaction going forward.
Okay, and it's not for us to approve it, or just so we have the information, the accurate information of who's holding that permit. And David, did you have a?
Is this, I don't see a problem with it, I'm just wondering, is this what we want to do going forward every time that we have somebody come to us for, because I think we're kind of setting a precedent that we're going to ask every time there's a transfer. Again,
No,
I
what
just
we're
don't,
doing
we're not
is,
really in the business of doing that, but
so what we're doing is we're making sure that our staff is aware if there's a transfer of ownership at the property, because right now they are not.
right, but I'm not
Correct.
sure. Mr. Newell.
Well, the special use is transferable, notification of ownership. I'm not sure what the benefit of that is, other than just knowing who's there, because we can look at the tax rolls anyways if there's a complaint on the property. The mechanism for notification on businesses is different for the county than it is, for example, for municipalities, also in Vancouver as well. The county has a business registration process through the clerk's office that's established statutorily. They do not have a business license process as municipalities do. Typically in a municipality, we have a business license process that goes through their internal process through the different departments where they verify zoning and things of that nature. So that's their way of tracking change of ownership and change of business. We do not have that. We don't have that process. So, and also years ago, I actually worked with Matt on this years ago, just to make clear for the county's process is that we actually added that checkbox on the application, not transferable or not, because there had to be clear intent to have that. And I would say almost all applications now do that. But we did that because of this confusion over transferability, non-transferable, what do we do? So it wasn't a question at that point, once it was transferable, that we're tracking ownership or anything like that. We deal with it on a case-by-case basis if they have complaints on the property. What is the ordinance statements authorizing the property, as well as the conditions as well.
Thank you. Member Mitchell.
All right. I'm going to sell this right now. I say we go ahead and let it be transferable and leave it to the municipality to determine whether or not it's a member of the family or not. They can, for the next person that buys that property, they can say, hey, are you a member of the Bangston family? Are you a member of Carmine family? And then if they are, they are. Leave it local. Let us state where this business is. And the county should be hands-off. So I'm in favor of making it transferable as it is and throwing it back to the municipality or township to determine what the rest is.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? All right, I'll start up to board member Balich.
Yeah, if you think about a bar or a restaurant, and it's an LLC or an extra company, and that they decide to sell it to another person, nobody gets involved and say, hey, you can't buy this bar or restaurant unless you're approved by the county again. I mean, we're approving a use. That's all we're doing, approving a use. And it's like a bar. How many times are bars sold? 10 times. They don't come back. You know, so I would just, say it should be transferable. It's just a farm with ag tourism, basically.
Thank you.
So, I mean, and we want to support the ag tourism part of it. So, you know what? We shouldn't be arguing about it because it's illogical not to just go ahead and pass it with transfer.
I do agree. Thank you, Mr. Balich. Mr. Kavanaugh, thank you. Do we have anybody here from the public that would like to comment on this? Anybody from Green Garden Township? Any comments from the public? Okay. Oh, sir.
I was just thinking that if you make it harder to sell, the odds are they would break that property up and develop it.
Oh, sorry. Would you please come up to the
Oh, I'm sorry.
Give us your name, where you're from, address.
Jeff Ryan.
I'm sorry, you have to come up to the podium.
Oh, okay.
All the way up.
That's okay. And then make sure he turns to like that.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jeff Ryman, 23301 South Old Hill Road, Minooka. Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm here for another purpose, but I was just thinking that if the property is harder to sell because a special use permit can't be relied on or transferred, then the alternative would be to break it up and develop it. So I think if we want to keep the property whole, it would be better to have the special use transferable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Unless there are any other comments, will you please call the roll?
Special use permit for rural events with 7 conditions. Frankie Pretzel,
Yes.
Natalie Coleman,
Yes.
Julie Berkowitz,
Yes.
Katie Dean Schlotman,
Yes.
Raquel Mitchell,
Yes.
Sherry Newquist,
Yes.
and Destiny Ortiz.
Okay, motion carries. Number 2, zoning case 22079, Charles L. Mead and Diana C. Mead, owner of records. This is in Wilton Township, 14755 Doyle Road and vacant Doyle Road, Manhattan, County Board District 2, requesting zoning map amendment from A1s to R2.
We have to have a vote on the second special use permit for
Okay.
ZC 22050.
Sorry about that, that's on me. So I need a motion.
Motion Newquist.
Second Mitchell?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that one passes too.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will go back to number 2. Charles Mead and Diana Mead, owner of record, Wilton Township, 14755 Doyle Road and vacant Doyle Road, Manhattan, County Board District 2, requesting zoning map amendment from A1 to R2.
Motion Newquist.
Second Mitchell?
Okay, any comments from the staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So zoning case CC 22079 takes place just outside of Wilton Township. Currently, there are 2 parcels that are going through a subdivision process to basically correct what happened. So these 2 lots, back in the day, were divided off from an ag parcel and basically became what they are currently shaped as. The applicants, in doing so, they did violate the subdivision ordinance at the time, so the Illinois Plat Act, which basically says anything less than 5 acres has to go through a plat subdivision process. They are going through a minor plat now, and in order for zoning to be able to sign off on that plat, they are requesting to be rezoned to the R2 district. Also, you will see in the staff report that they are reconfiguring the lots to square them off so it's not oddly shaped like puzzle pieces. So this entire property is 3.05 acres. Each lot will be roughly 4,000 square feet, give or take, which is the minimum requirements of R2. I think they will be a little bit larger, actually. Each will meet the minimum requirements for the R2 district, so 100 feet of lot frontage. The existing parcel that has the residence and garage would be conforming to the R2 district setback standards. And then the proposed parcel 1 will be allowed to be buildable, essentially. So the applicant would want to build a single-family residence adjacent to his parents, essentially. In terms of the map amendments criteria, staff just kind of wants to point out a couple key traits, that there is residential in this area. The closest is R2, which is right at 52 and this particular street, Doyle. And that's actually used as a fire protection district property. But you do have, forest preserves in the area. It is still highly agricultural, and the proposed subdivision would still be in character of that. A lot of the uses are estate residential, larger lot residential, or agricultural. And then the suitability of these properties, there is no agricultural uses occurring on the property. It's mostly just residential, so rezoning from an ag property to a residential zoning district is more appropriate in that sense. In terms of this proposed subdivision, the intended conformance with the county's adopted plans with our land resource management plan Typically, this would be more traditional residential. However, given that it is in an area where it is agricultural, it's common to see two houses very clustered together as old farmsteads, homesteads that kind of divide off as development occurs or families change over or leave, houses to family members. This would be in conformance with the land resource management plan, so staff just wanted to point that out. In terms of the agencies notified for the request, there were no objections. There were no objectors present at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the map amendment request unanimously. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I, reading this a little bit, they use the word subdivision, but it's one lot. Somebody wants to build next to their parents. I actually have done this. I live next door to my mom and dad, divided property. It works out very well. Do you have any comments from committee members? Any comments from the public? All right, we have a motion and a second.
I move that we approve this.
We have a motion and a second already.
Previous roll. Thank you.
And second.
Previous.
We have a previous and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 3, zoning case 22081, Skyline Memorial Park, Inc., SCI Illinois Services, LLC, owner of record. This is in Monique Township, 24800 South Governor's Highway, Monique, County Board District 3, requesting zoning map amendment from A1 to C2 for 5.37 acres. And I'm looking for a motion.
Motion Rehnquist.
Second Mitchell. Previous roll.
Do we have any comments?
Staff can give a presentation briefly, if I may. So with this particular request, staff wants to point out that this is the Skyline Memorial Park. It is a cemetery. Currently, there are 3 pins that are a 45-acre site. So it is an active cemetery. There are plots with eternal residents, so to speak. So this cemetery was established back in 1961. There are several structures on site that include a crematorium, a cemetery office, and some other mausoleums and memorial structures. For the zoning ordinance, funeral and interment services, so say the office being converted into a funeral home, which is what the applicant wishes to do, would require rezoning to a commercial zoning district as it's not permitted in an agricultural district, which is what the current zoning is. So the applicant is here looking to divide off 5.37 acres, again, to avoid having to go through a subdivision process. And in doing so, would be able to do the funeral interment type services that is accessory to a cemetery, but in a commercial setting. In doing so, one of the existing structures is actually, you'll see what the variance request was, 8 feet instead of what was required for a commercial district. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of that, so that is an active variance approval should this map amendment go forward. In terms of the owners, Skyline Memorial Park is owned by SCI Illinois Services, which is an LLC, and David E. Klein is president, Lindia S. Roundtree is secretary. The agent is John Sesnorowski of SCI Shared Resources, and Richard Kavanaugh is the attorney here on behalf of the applicants. In terms of the presentation at Planning and Zoning, there were no objections received for this particular map amendment. The surrounding area is the village of the, give me 1 second.
Looks like Monique Township.
It's Monique Township. It's within the village of University Park. It's surrounding it, and it's all industrial in this area. So this particular use going commercial would be, in conformance with the existing uses in the area. There were no objectors at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and in terms of the vote from the Planning and Zoning, they did vote for approval of the map amendment. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do you have any comments or questions from the committee? Is there anybody from the public who'd like to comment on this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I just need
a little bit of clarification. So I was reading this briefly just now. So if it's changed, the cemetery can't be in a C2, is that correct?
That is correct. So there are two separate distinctions in our zoning ordinance. Cemeteries are permitted by right in ag, but then we also have funeral and interment services, which is more like the structures that would not be permitted in agricultural districts. So that's where they would be permitted typically in commercial zoning districts. So here it's kind of an interesting case where the commercial side of the cemetery where you're going to have offices, you're going to have, services for burial and things like that, that would be a commercial zoning district associated with the cemetery. And that's what is being requested here.
Will there be any disruption to those that are already buried there?
So that's actually why the variance was requested. They did not want to disrupt any of the existing plots within the cemetery. So to put the property line where they did, it was actually putting the structure 8 feet instead of making it 10 feet so that the cemetery with the existing plots would not be impacted by the request. And you can also see that reflected in how the parcel's configured for how it's the 5.37 is kind of an N shape.
Okay, the cemetery is, obviously a concern with me. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Do we have anybody here from Skyline or SCI? Okay, start with Mr. Kavanaugh. You want to come on up to the microphone?
If there's a question, right?
The staff report, I think, was very thorough, and the issue is you can't have a funeral parlor in an ag district. It has to be in a commercial district. The crematorium was built, I think, probably 30 years ago, well before my clients purchased this property, and it's too close to burial plots. We had to include that in the C2 zoning because that's where it belongs. Again, it was built without a permit. And it's 8 feet 1 inch, I think, away from a burial plot, which is why we're asking for it now, the variance for side yard setback to 8 feet from 10 feet. But the C2 zoning is very appropriate for a funeral parlor.
Any questions from the committee, Mr. Kavanaugh? Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw some other hands from Skyline or SCI. Go ahead. You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. We do have a motion and a second. Previous roll. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Number 4, zoning case 22066, Cradle Farms Partnerships, owner of record. This is in Peatone Township, vacant property on West Kennedy Road, Peatone County Board District Number 2, requesting special use permit for a solar farm.
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Second. Staff, would you like to shed some light on this?
Thank you, Chair Gretzel. So this solar farm request came in on August 23rd, 2022, before the county adopted its most recent solar farm ordinance on September 15th, 2022, so it's being reviewed under that ordinance. Any other requests for solar farms that came after January 27th, 2023, when the state passed a new statute that the county's ordinance is going to have to conform to, is currently being held in a holding pattern until we bring our code into conformance with the state statute. But this one, because it came in before that, is allowed to go forward. ZC 22066 is for a solar farm in South Peatone Township, a mile north of the Will and Kankakee County line and a quarter mile south of Peatone Village. The property is a conforming A1 zone lot that's more or less 57 acres and has 1,166 feet of frontage along Kennedy Road and 1,802 feet of frontage along 88th Avenue. The property is divided into 4 pieces by a 380-foot wide ComEd property that runs east-west, and I-57, which roughly runs north-south. The applicant applied for the special use area for the whole 57 acres. However, they only intend to develop the southeast 29 acres into the solar farm. The initial term of the lease will run for 25 years with 2 renewal terms of 5 years. Once operational, the solar farm could be operational for 35 years, and the applicant has requested that the special use permit be transferable to all future property owners. The solar farms will be about 4 megawatts and have 12,700 modules in a north-south configuration. The staff recommended approval of the solar farm with 15 conditions. The applicant requested that a 16th condition be added. The condition reading, screening shall be installed along the northern edge of the solar farm, a landscape area at least 10 feet in width, with at least 1 shrub per 5 linear feet, plus at least 1 evergreen tree per 25 linear feet of perimeter area. Shrubs must be at least 3 feet in height at the time of planting, and evergreen trees must be at least 5 feet at the height of planting in line with section 155-9245. And this was, I believe that the applicant was working with the village of Peatone to add that extra condition. So there were four speakers that testified in favor of the solar project, no objectors. The speakers included the mayor of Peatone, a member of the community that has lived in the area for 7 generations, lives more or less 5 miles away from the site, and his current line of work is in solar farms. A representative for farmers in the area stated that the land is very isolated and the solar project is good for the county. And a representative from 174 Carpenter Local of Will County that stated that the solar project will have an all-trained workforce that will provide jobs. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted to approve the special use permit with the 16 conditions unanimously. And this concludes my summary, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And the applicant's attorney is also here with that, and will be able to provide a brief presentation and a summary of what they're doing.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions from the committee?
I just want to say that I toured this site along with a representative from the village of Peatone. And yeah, they're 100% in favor of it. And it is very isolated. You have to go down a dirt road to get to it. And it's screened off from the expressway. The closest neighbors have no objections. And it's one of those, this was interesting, I didn't realize this. There's no battery storage. It feeds directly into the power grid. So I would say it really looked to me like a perfect place for a solar farm, actually.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else in the committee? Okay, Chairman O'Dowd.
Yeah, I was just curious, so the village is the one that requested the screening and the landscaping?
The village worked with the applicant to come up with the 16 conditions to have a strip of screening along the north end of the solar farm, yes.
And that's on Kennedy? That's on Kennedy?
The north side of the solar farm would be closer to the ComEd high tension lines.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Member Berkowitz?
I just have a question on the handout. It says here that it provides enough energy to power over 900 homes. So I'm wondering, does this just go into a pool of electric to be dispersed, or do we know who gets that power specifically? And then the second question, it says it'll save over $200,000 annually. So I was just wondering how they get to those numbers.
Do we have somebody here from Reynolds? Would you like to?
Yeah, I'm planning on making a quick presentation, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's
And I
fine.
will answer those questions when we get there.
Please state your name, address.
Good morning, everyone. My
You
name
have
is
to
Molly.
press the button.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Molly Spitzer, and I'm a representative of Trajectory Energy Partners here today to present our Prairie Solar application for a special use permit. If you would, next So this is a 4 megawatt community solar project in Peatone Township in Will County. And the 4 megawatts is where we get the number from the community for the 900 homes. So a 4 megawatt project will essentially just be enough to feed onto the grid to power 900 homes. Can you go to the next slide, please? And the way that this is a community solar project, and the way that community solar works is that we will put that power from the solar farm onto the grid through the ComEd lines, which are located on Kennedy Road to the south of the project. There are those high tension ComEd lines to the north of the project, but those are not actually what we're feeding into. We're feeding into the smaller distribution lines that are to the south. And the way that community solar works is that it allows people who are not able to put solar on their physical roofs to subscribe to this community solar project, where they would save about 20% of their ComEd electric bills. And this is our updated site map of the project. When we originally turned it in, we did not have that screening to the north side, where we kind of indicated with the green line there. But yes, in our conversations with the village of Peatone, they thought that they might want to develop that property at some point. We can show a little bit more of there's a neighborhood that's about 3,000 feet away. It's very far, and you wouldn't be able to see the project from there essentially, but we wanted to add the screening just in case. The screening essentially would be like right underneath the ComEd lines, but you can see there that it's surrounded almost entirely by agricultural land. Next slide, please. A little bit about Trajectory Energy Partners, who's developing the project. We are a local Illinois company based out of Chicago, and we primarily focus on building projects in Illinois. We have a few projects in other states, but Illinois is essentially where we do most of our work. Next slide, please. And a little bit more about the setback details. We are set back from Kennedy Road there, as well as the interstate, in compliance with the ordinance. Next slide. And the project is located here basically because it is a good location for interconnection capacity. These smaller lines actually don't have a ton of interconnection capacity, so even if we were to along the 20 miles that the lines connect as much power as we possibly could, you could probably only fit about 20 megawatts there, and our 4 megawatts is on 28 acres, so it's really not, it's not something where there's a ton of capacity on those lines, so it needs to be specifically located in an area like this. Next slide, please. And then here's a little bit more about the economic benefits and the very significantly increased tax revenue. As you can see, the current tax on the property about $1,400 in 2020, and that increases to about $20,000 for the first year of our project. Next slide. And on the decommissioning of the project, we did include a preliminary decommissioning plan in our application, and that goes through all the steps that we would take, including making sure that there's a decommissioning bond with the county in case anything were to happen with the project at the end of it, that there would always be money to take care of decommissioning at the end of the life of the project. But we also enter into an agricultural impact mitigation agreement prior to the building permit stage, and at that point, the AMA will actually govern the decommissioning provisions of the project. Next slide, please. It's a little bit out of whack up there, but essentially we did a lot of neighbor outreach. We sent 2 of our own letters in addition to the official zoning letter that was sent to all the adjacent properties. We did notify that whole neighborhood, even though we were not required to get in touch with us. We held an open house to make sure that all the neighbors were aware and could come ask questions and learn about subscribing to the project. And we also were in contact with the village of Peatone throughout the development of this project. Next slide, please. And as part of that, the landowner is potentially considering annexing the project with the Village of Peatone. That process has not occurred yet, and we're not sure what the timeline is, but that is something that they are considering, and in talks with the Village of Peatone to do. And that's all. If anyone has any further questions.
Member Mitchell?
My question to you is, when you say you notified the surrounding neighbors, did you notify them individually, or did you notify an HOA or say a trailer park owner? Did you notify the actual
Yes.
residents who live in those homes?
Yes, yeah, we have a record of every single person that lives on that, the southern edge of that neighborhood, and we sent letters to all of them individually.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Member Berkowitz?
Thank you. You mentioned the taxes increase from over 1,400 to, I believe it was over 20,000. So where do those taxes go?
We usually provide we usually have like a breakdown of the taxes that I could provide later, but it generally goes directly to most of the school districts. Those would be the biggest benefactors.
Does staff know?
Julie, it's the same as any property
Yeah.
taxes. So,
That's what I'm gonna break
so this
down.
is unincorporated right now, this is unincorporated land, it's currently a farm. And so the taxes that farmland is assessed at like under 1,400. But because it's a solar farm, when we put the ordinance in back in the day, that particular part of the farm, say if it's larger than, this is 57 acres total, right? You said, but you're only using how many?
28.
28. So the other parts can stay ag, and then this part that's generating solar gets taxed. Which is why the Village of Peatone is interested, because they would like to have some of those tax dollars. For me, I would like them to just stay in the unincorporated area, because it's 3,000 feet. They are not close to the village at all. So it would be a lot of development that would have to grow. And also, I totally don't understand why we would want to have the 16th condition, because that trees and shrubs and everything down the middle of the farm field, there's no water supplies, throw the things in the holes and plant them and then pray for rain to see that they, to see to stay alive. This is why I've been opposed to the screening at all, unless it's right next to somebody's home. That makes it appropriate to me. Then maybe you could like water it yourself if you want to make sure the trees continue to grow. But I've seen these things just mostly die out in solar farms. And the only thing I want to say is whoever your contractor is, if you guys proceed with it, I think the 16th condition should not exist. The Village of Peatone, it's within their 1.5 miles, but whatever. It's so far you couldn't see it. And it's way out on a dead-end road that nobody else can see it either. But if you guys keep that 16th condition, then I would say that whoever does your installation, I hope that they would be very, conscientious of the fact that we dig the hole, we put the plant in, we actually plant the plant, because I've seen some where they're just, the holes have all been dug, some of the trees are thrown in and bushes are thrown in, and some are actually planted, and then the plastic containers are left on the side. I've seen that in some of these projects that have happened out in Crete, actually, Sherry. So I hope that if you guys do that, I don't see a need for the 16th condition, and can the land use committee just get rid of that? I know Peatone asked for it, but it makes no sense at all. I mean, I can't imagine a time when, by the time that Peatone, the Village of Peatone would possibly grow out to that far, people are going to know that solar farm is there. The solar farm may not even be there. I mean, we don't know what the future of solar capacity is. Remember the old computers took up this entire room. Now you carry one and you're sitting in your pocket every day right here. So I don't think that that's needed. I know the Village of Peatone asked for it, and like I said, I hope the owner doesn't annex, because they want some of the tax dollars, is what they're looking to get from this, because you see the increase. And we did that back when we first with the total zoning ordinance, because they are an energy company, they are making a profit off of it, then we felt that we should be able to benefit as well. Although, of course, there's no students going to school or anything, it's a benefit to the school system to have those tax dollars. So those are my comments. A lot of you guys are new either to the committee or to the county board. So you should really ask all these different these things that we ask solar companies to do, went through a very large vetting process of sitting down with land use, with the land use committee, with the Farm Bureau, so that we can make sure that a solar company didn't come in, just run roughshod over the residents, run roughshod over the owner, make sure that the field tiles are all properly taken care of, so a field tile doesn't get broken. And all the solar companies have been willing to work with us because they want to do that. That's how they have to get the business to be made. And so we did take a long time to do that. Staff has become experts on it now after years of solar farms, which at the beginning none of us knew anything. So we do have that, and then they have to mow the areas and stuff like that to keep the weeds down. These are things we learned over the time, of course, of time. So, but I just think the 16th condition, in my opinion, makes no sense whatsoever. You saw what it faces. 3,000 feet. It's a long, long way. Your telephone poles in the country are 200 feet apart, so imagine 3,000. Long way. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Would somebody on the committee would like to make a motion with exclusion of the 16th condition, or?
I just want to say, so back to my question, so they receive a tax bill just like the owner of the property, is that correct?
That's my understanding for the state statute with the solar farm.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah, so the taxes are actually, they are set by state statute, so the calculation is done entirely under the Illinois state law. But as far as,
Can you put your mic on?
oh, I'm sorry.
I can't walk.
The taxes are done entirely by state statute, so it will always be pursuant to Illinois state law that those taxes are assessed.
And paid to the county, just like the, okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, but as far as the conditions, there is no representative, I don't believe, from the Village of Peatone here today to speak on their reasoning for it. I just wanted to add that maybe it makes sense to put, like, if development occurs on the northern side of the property, then it would be screened appropriately if you're considering excluding that condition.
So, you're speaking on behalf of the company. Were you guys just doing that because I had to?
Yeah, just because we want to work with the Village of Peatone, and that's what they have requested.
Do you also agree it's unnecessary at this time?
I mean, it's not really up to us to say that whether it's necessary or not for people who actually live in that area or are in the Village of Peatone, but okay.
I'm not inclined to, I hear what Judy's saying totally, but, in my opinion, Peatone was very adamant about that condition, and the developer is willing, and they didn't share their logic with me, but I could see where, potentially if there is development, it would make a big difference to have that screening. So I'm inclined to, since all parties are agreed to it, I'm inclined to just leave it in there. That would be my thought.
Anyone else up here? Member Berkowitz?
So it was brought up that there's a possibility that this parcel, or at least they're talking about, Peatone's talking about annexing it. Is this property adjacent to Peatone's current property line? So it isn't. So if there is that desire, can you do that? Can a village come in and annex land that does not touch or isn't contiguous with their existing border?
I can speak a little bit on, I don't answer directly on the code, but as far as the parcel that is located in between, thank you, Adrian. As far as the parcel that's located in between our parcel and the Village of Peatone, I believe it's our same landowner that owns that parcel as well. So it is possible that it could be annexed, or both of those parcels could potentially be annexed into the Village of Peatone, and it would be contiguous. But that process is entirely separate from our process of getting a special use permit, and we have worked with an outside attorney to ensure that the special use permit, even if the property was annexed they were to annex into it, that the special use permit would carry with the county.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Julie, you're on the committee, so.
Yeah, well, okay, so, this is, I was gonna say that I'm inclined to, I'm inclined to fix 16, either make it drop tolerance or forget it altogether. That's what I was thinking.
Maybe on the motion.
Yeah, but I wanted to, that's why I was
Chair Bob.
Right, so it's farmland, guys, so there's no water supply out there, so once these plants would get put in the ground, shrubs or trees, they're locked to if it's gonna rain or if it's not gonna rain. I can tell you, if you go out to the solar farm in Eastern Will County, in Crete specifically, where they have planted some shrubbery in that, these things all don't survive. So it makes, to me, it makes absolutely no sense. Now, if there was a neighbor, right, like I said, where Steve is, if his house is there and they're off, their setback as they should be, and Steve likes them and wants that because we've required them, because there's a neighbor to put that in, he could lug a hose out there and make sure they survive. The solar company's not going to do that. They're going to have whoever they hire, they're going to do this. And like I say, I mean, for the guy, I don't know what the benefit to the owner of the land, for me, I know everyone on that street there that lives, okay? No one on that street would ever want to be annexed into the village because they don't pay additional tax dollars. If you go to the village now, you're paying village tax dollars on top of your county tax dollars. So the only reason the village is interested is we're probably within, are we within the mile and a half of their, we're in the mile and a half of their thing. I feel that we should represent our constituents, and I think it's crazy to ask for the solar company. It's just going to be a waste of dollars. It's a waste of dollars. I have no idea when that community might. I walked it 1 billion times during campaign season, and that community itself has grown a tiny, tiny bit within itself because it had never fully grown. To go to that extent would take a lot of years. This solar company may not even be the owners of the facility at that time because solar companies change from time to time. And I know the interest in supporting it, the village's interest in supporting it is because they want to get those tax dollars. I don't really care if the village wants to get tax dollars or not, to me. So if they annex in, that's the landowner's decision to make. If they want to do it, they could have said Peatone because it's a 1.5 mile. They could have complained about it and said, no, we're not going to support it. They could have probably put in a legal objection to it, so we have to have a majority. But we have, as a county board, supported solar farms with the conditions that we feel are appropriate. I'm just saying what we've learned over time is we have the condition of the plantings, and it typically doesn't make sense, like I say, unless we're right next to somebody, because people flying past on 57 aren't going to care. And nobody should be walking in that farm field, that farmer going back and forth, he's not going to look at anything. That's my opinion. You guys vote the way you guys want to.
You want to go ahead?
Okay, so I'm actually going to move to, I guess, to approve this and without 16.
Okay. We have a motion to amend it to remove the 16 condition.
I'll second it. Second by Dean Schlotman.
All right, we have a motion.
Previous
Mitchell,
Schlotman.
second. Schlotman, previous Mitchell, second Berkowitz, and second Coleman. All in favor of amending?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So we can't do the previous one. Just do one.
Right, so we do
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
one. Okay, do we have any other comments on this? Okay, so we need a new motion. Right? We need a new motion
To approve it.
to approve it?
Yep.
Okay,
As amended.
looking for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Schlotman,
Second.
second Berkowitz, previous Rule Mitchell,
Second.
second Coleman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion as amended passes. Last, under new business, zoning case 22095, Garrett C. Harris Trust. This is in Manhattan Township, vacant property on South Schoolhouse Road, Manhattan, County Board District 2, requesting zoning map amendment from A2 to A1 staff on this one.
Thank you, Chairman. I have comments. As mentioned, the subject property is in Manhattan Township and is located on the west side of South Schoolhouse Road. It is zoned A2, is 3 acres, and has 198.43 feet of lot frontage along South Schoolhouse Road. The site currently meets A2 lot area requirements of 2.5 acres, but lacks the required 300 feet of frontage. The applicant applied for a map amendment from A2 to A1 to permit a consolidation with an adjacent lot that he also owns, the A1 parcel that is adjacent, and a variance for minimum lot frontage from 300 feet to 198.43 feet along South Schoolhouse Road. There are 14 parcels, the subject parcel included, that were created between 1986 and 1988. They totaled 40.30 acres, and in 1986, a map amendment was approved to rezone from A1 to A2 before later then being divided. All but the subject and adjacent owned by the applicant's parcels have been improved since with structures. There are identified wetlands on the subject parcel that pose a difficulty to build, as the county's water resource ordinances require building setbacks from wetlands. The adjacent parcel only has 10 feet of frontage along Baker Road. The applicant previously built a driveway entrance onto Schoolhouse Road to the east on the subject parcel to provide access to his adjacent lot, with the intention of pursuing the necessary zoning action to consolidate the two parcels. The county does not allow for the creation of split zone lots. The applicant is requesting the A2 lot be rezoned to A1 to permit the consolidation, and the variance to allow for the consolidated property to conform to the A1 district standards and obtain a building permit for a metal building for farm equipment storage in the southwest corner, where the driveway will end in the adjacent parcel. The applicant has submitted a petition for consolidation, and if the variance is approved, staff will forward the consolidation form to mapping and plating. For further processing, it can take about a year to assign the new PIN to the property. Of the agencies notified, the Will South Cook Soil and Water Conservation District comments stated, the wetland and soil issues on the property should be considered for any future construction. One concerned citizen was present. The neighboring property owner stated that since the new driveway was constructed, water flows onto their property. It was determined that engineering reviewed and approved the permit, and that the applicant adhered to the requirements in the county's water resource ordinance. Staff recommended approval of both the map amendment and lot frontage variance, and the PZC approved both requests. This concludes the summary for zoning case 22095.
Thank you. Any comments from the committee? Okay, any comments from the public? Or anybody here from Garrett Harris Trust?
I'm here on behalf of the applicant, but we stand behind staff report and have no comments to offer unless the committee has questions.
Thank you.
Second, Mitchell.
We have a motion, Newquist, second Mitchell. Previous Coleman.
Second.
Second Berkowitz, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. That concludes new
Oh, wait,
business.
we have to change the never mind, I think we're good.
Concludes new business under other business. Number one, request for a refund of fees for zoning case ZC 22074. Mr. Tim Winter requesting refund for special use permit for a truck terminal. Any comments from staff on this one?
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll be real quick. The applicant had submitted for a special use permit for a truck terminal back last fall, September specifically. All the necessary paperwork was submitted by the end of October, and staff had cashed his check for the request. It had turned out that the village of Romeoville and the school district where this project is located, they had a school nearby. They were going to object to this request, and instead of going forward, they decided to withdraw the request. The staff never published the case in a newspaper, nor provided notice, or prepared staff reports. So with that being said, the owner asked to see if they could get their fees refunded, and the department does not have the authority to get the fees back. In this case, it requires county board approval. So minimal staff work was done in this case, and There are similar cases in the past, the county board has granted a refund of those fees. So that would be up to this board and to make that decision of whether or not they thought it was appropriate.
Thank you. And Matt, did you?
I did, thank you. And I apologize, this isn't timely, but I know where you're going, when you put the last vote, so I want to address it because it made me think of why we, maybe this is untimely, we can readdress it after the vote on this matter, but the last vote we did on, what was that?
The zoning amendment to the
Yes,
A2A1?
A2A1, correct. There was a motion for a prior roll call vote, and then there was a second, and we just said all aye. However, I know you were going with that. The last roll call vote was 6-1, 6 yes, 1 no, and that happened on the last two votes. So
Yes.
technically, under the last case that we just did from the A2 to A1, the vote was 6-1, and I don't think that might have been your intention.
Correct, so thank you for clarifying. I was a no on amending, on amending the motion, but then I was a yes. I wanted to be a yes on passing it and a yes.
That's why you can't do a previous roll. That's why you
Sorry,
can't. That's
that
why
I
you can't
should
do a
have
previous
caught
roll. That's why you
Can we
can't do a
change?
previous roll when it's enough.
But I was suggesting, again, this is untimely, it's my fault, I should have jumped up, but that's what it went.
Thank you, I should have caught that.
So my thoughts were, let's just finish the one that Brian's talking about now, and then, because we're at the same meeting, we can go back and readdress that. So I would suggest we conclude this one, and we'll go back to the last one.
I'll set, so to recap on what Brian said, this isn't new precedent or anything. They didn't really do all the work. The person that wrote the check for $3,000 is like,
So the parcel, is it currently zoned for industrial then, for a truck terminal?
Adrian, do you know? It would require a special use for the truck terminal, so the answer is no. You have to have a special use permit for a truck terminal. And that's what they were requesting.
Right, and I have a couple of questions. Is it industrial though?
I believe so, because it wasn't for a map amendment, it was a special use permit request. So if there was a map amendment, that would be additional, would have been an additional zoning action on the property.
So somebody else could come up and try to do the same thing again in this process. We could find ourselves in this situation again if somebody new comes in and tries to put in a truck. I know, I'm just asking a question.
I think, do we have a motion?
I think we have a motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other comments on this? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Frankie Kretzel,
Yes.
Natalie Coleman,
Yes?
Julie Berkowitz,
Yes.
Katie Dean Schlotman,
Yes.
Raquel Mitchell,
Yes.
Sherry Newquist,
Yes.
and Destiny Ortiz.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to go back to, under new business, number 4, the actual vote. We would like to add, can we just add
Number 5.
Number 14.
It started at number 4.
Yeah, it started with
We amended
number
it. We voted.
I voted no on
5-1.
amending the motion, but then I wanted to go, yes, and actually approve.
Right.
5-1 to amend, and then all 6 of us are yes for the
So
actual.
6-1 to amend.
Yeah.
And then for the actual special use permit for solar farm with 16 conditions.
No,
With 50, I'm sorry, 15
We're voting yes
conditions.
on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I voted,
No, it's my fault.
So are you voting yes then?
I am,
Thank you.
and then for number
But the
Five.
previous roll for number 5 as well.
number 5, I'm voting yes.
That's
Right.
it, yeah, because if you let the previous roll, which was unanimous, then we're good.
We're good. Okay, moving on to number 2.
Wait, I would make a motion for either reconsideration or clarification on number 4. 5.
Number 4,
Okay.
CC06.
4, okay, yeah.
We're looking for a motion of reconsideration for back to the solar farm. I'm looking for a motion on that. We're going to vote again.
Okay, so you want me to move to remove 16?
No, that passed.
Okay, that passed. Now what do we do?
A motion to approve.
Okay, I move to approve.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Mitchell, a second from Newquist, to approve as amended. And now we need a roll call, please.
Roll call now.
Yeah.
Frankie Kretzel,
Yes.
Natalie Coleman,
Yes.
Julie Berkowitz,
Yes.
Katie Dean Schlappman,
Yes.
Raquel Mitchell,
Yes.
Sherry Newquist,
Yes.
and Destiny Ortiz.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, back under other business, number 2, zoning text amendments to the county solar and wind zoning restrictions. Colin, would you like to comment on this?
So we had the public hearing last week, and we had comments from the Farm Bureau, which should be in your, not the packet that I just handed out, but the packet that you received in email. And there were some changes based on those comments that I made to the text. One was in the text, it was written as center line of the road. And I presented it, and the statute says the road right of way, so the edge of the road. So I had the text incorrect. So thank you, Mark, for correcting me on that. And then, secondly, he requested in section N of the solar energy facilities, number 4, regarding drain tile repair. The repair of subsurface drainage systems shall, at a minimum, be in compliance with the agricultural impact agreement as identified in section Q of this division, which is the application portion. And there is no problem with that within adding that to the text. Going through the text, I am taking out the increased size for wind turbines. It's just something that we probably should have more time on to study. So it's just being eliminated altogether, which is fine because it was just my suggestion as a long-range plan for you guys to consider. So we'll just consider it later. And the other comment received from the Farm Bureau is some wording to be added to 3 different sections within the new text. It states that all impacted agricultural land, whether impacted during construction, operation, decommissioning activities, must, at a minimum, be remediated pursuant to the terms of the agricultural impact agreement. And the sections that they would be in refer to the IEMA. I did not add this because the State Attorney's Office has reminded me thoroughly that we should mirror the language within the state statute. This would be adding additional language beyond what the state statute indicates. However, it just reiterates what is already in the statute. So there's no harm either way. It just makes it more blatant in context. So I left it out. However, it would be up to you, and probably with consulting with the State's Attorney's Office whether or not you want to include that within our text. So those are the changes that are being made to the text that was presented to you previously.
Thanks, Colin. Comments from the committee?
Question, so can we leave out the part about the larger wind turbines? Because
Yes, I took it out completely.
But I mean, isn't that then contrary to?
No, that was something that I put in as a long-range planner. This is something that I'm seeing in the industry that could happen in the future.
Got it.
But it's not happening here now, but it's something that we'll need to consider in the future. But because we're talking about it, would now be a good time? The answer is no. So-
And it's not addressed in the state?
No,
in the
no,
state
it is not.
statutes. Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Okay, Chair O'Gallagher.
So I just want to have clarification as far as, because I haven't had a conversation. I know that there's a trailer bill to this lame duck legislation that got passed, which took citing authority away from the county. So I just want to know what things are not going, what do they not have to follow? Do they still have to do the field tile studies as we had done before? Will the solar company still have to do maintenance, like mowing 4 to 5 times a year? Do you know that?
The drain tile would be part of the action regardless. The maintenance, that is not part of statute. Whether or not it can be something that we can request in the IEMA, I don't know, nor do I know if we can have that as a separate thing. The landscape maintenance is a tough one that I don't know the answer to.
I know that Mark's been working on it. Mark, would you be able to come up and speak to that at all? So the Illinois Association of Drainage Districts and the Illinois Farm Bureau are working on a trailer bill because of issues we've seen with this. So we did, like I said, take time to put our solar ordinance into place. And then the state went and did their own thing because of huge lobbying efforts. So we're trying to get some of that corrected. So Mark, do you know that? You have to put your mic on. There you go.
It was my understanding that as long as there's already a state ordinance in place, such as noxious weeds, that should still stay within the county. Am I correct, Matt?
It's a difficult question to answer with 100% certainty, but the state law is essentially, I can't talk. There we go. Okay. We can't be more strict, so we can't stop them from developing.
Correct, but I mean, the state does have a noxious weed ordinance, and you have somebody that would be already hired to be able to determine if those are noxious weeds or not out onto solar areas.
I think that's a good argument, that if there's already a state statute out there that's
Yeah.
requiring it, then it should be sufficient as well.
Okay, that was my understanding.
Yes, noxious weeds would be still, that statute would still be implemented. The question was whether or not the landscaping maintenance, the continued maintenance of the planted landscaping, can we make that part of our ordinance or not? Like Matt said,
Don't know.
Yeah, don't know, and since Matt said we can't be more strict, yeah, probably not.
Because that's our understanding too, when we were talking with the people that actually put the legislation forward, they said that that was a condition that we added here as an additional item for the solar farm, basically because they were not mowing. But I believe that portion of it will be taken away, Judy. As far as mowing purposes, requirement, but as far as the noxious weed and everything, I think we're good.
Okay, so I think what I would like to suggest is that we, I think we as a county should put forward a resolution, you guys should consider this, that the state AMA should be changed to allow a county to require mowing, because this has become an issue. If you drive past the solar farms, you see all these crazy things as tall as me or taller. And the local people have to look at that, and it's like, if you have the field planted with corn or beans, you're not having that, right? Because that's planted. But so this is the area between where the road ends and the variance, the distance off that easement. That is the area we've had trouble with, not necessarily within the solar farm itself, but like more on the perimeter of that. So it's something that we should consider, and maybe Julie's legislative committee could take that up. You guys can maybe talk about it maybe next month and see if we could work towards something like that together. I know the Farm Bureau would be supportive of us doing that too. So just an idea, you guys.
Board Member Belch?
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned from reading statutes, I'm not a lawyer, but I read a lot, and throughout the statutes, it talks about the state cannot legally do something to a county that the county feels is a detriment to the county. That term's used a lot. So if we think that whatever they're doing with the solar thing is a detriment to the county, we should be able to not have to listen to that thing and tell them no. And so my opinion, again, I ain't a lawyer, but I'll challenge the state's attorney or whoever wants to argue about it, that you are not supposed to stick us with something that we say is going to hurt us. So if we don't like it, we say no, we write a resolution, and we obey our resolution, and let them take us to court if they want to, but I guarantee you they will not, because we are correct. If we write a resolution to protect our people, that's what we're supposed to do as a county. Not listen to a bunch of people in Springfield that think it's good for us, but they don't live here.
Matt, did you want to comment on?
Just that I can in good conscience, the fact that I can't say that the county should go and do something contrary to state law, because under the supremacy clause, the state laws are going to trump our county ordinances. And then it goes up the chain. Federal law is going to trump state laws if they have exclusive jurisdiction. I could go on and on, but I'll leave it at that.
Just to make it clear, if the state was to come after the county because a state is going to enforce something on us that's going to hurt us, the people that live here are going to back us. The state isn't stupid, so they're not going to come and sue us. They're going to sit back and do nothing because they don't want to deal with it, because they won't want to look foolish, because they will. If our county says it's bad, they're going to leave us alone. And that's right, okay, they go into order like that, but the state isn't going to come down. They have no way to enforce this stuff on us. There's no way to do it. So we can't just be puppets to say, okay, they want to do, if I say to you, your neighbor can now go blow up cherry bombs on the 4th of July and you're cool. That is a detriment to you. So you can't, but I said it and I'm in the state. Because that's what this in essence is saying, that they could do whatever they want to us. The answer is no, they can't. We are a board recognized to take care of Will County residents, and that's our job. We don't have to listen to somebody that's telling us something wrong. And the state will not do anything. They might say, oh, you got to listen to us. Our attorney, state's attorney, is advisory only. The state's attorney is not the answer to the law. So when the state's attorney says something, no offense, he's advising us of the law. I'm telling you what's really going to happen. The reality of the law is that we can't do things that are wrong for our people, no matter what the state says. So what Judy just said, make a resolution, let's make a resolution. But in the resolution to say, hey, we worked real hard for a long time to set up this stuff, and now the state's going to come in and say you have no choice? Who are they to tell us no?
Thank you for your comments.
I would agree with you, Steve. And that's why we sent that, and that's why we're working on legislation to change it on both the House and the Senate. And we sat down with both the sponsors, and they admitted there was quite a few holes in their legislation. So hopefully we can get that addressed. They'll bring the power back to the county where it should be.
Thanks, Mark.
Just real quick, I think Colin can explain that we have certain requirements on the current statute on timeline we have to meet. I understand there's legislation in Springfield, but we don't know what's going to become of that. So we need to kind of work on this concurrently and still go through and process the amendments that Colin is talking about, separate and apart from the other discussions. So if you have questions on the timeline, Colin can explain that.
Can I ask
Chair Bell.
Can I ask Mark, I have one more question for you. What's the House bill and the Senate bill numbers?
I was thinking that you might ask, so I brought that. Senator Joyce is Senate Bill 1297, and Representative Yadnak is House Bill 3146.
Thank you.
And Colin, if we don't approve this month, what are we looking at as far as deadline?
It has to be approved by May 27th.
You should approve it.
Yeah.
That was the question.
That's your question?
Yeah.
Colin, I have a question on page 13. So, section H, it says that for a test wind tower, no special permit is required, just a regular building permit, correct? So they will come to you and apply for a regular building permit.
Correct.
Is there any notification to the surrounding community
No.
in that process?
No, just make a regular building permit, except for the fact that it needs to be dismantled within 3 years.
So that's a concern to me. I know it would be very confusing to neighbors if all of a sudden they saw this great amount of activity, you know, impacting the roads and everything. And also, probably I would anticipate we will get feedback from them because they weren't able to express their voice. So is there a way to require that there is communication with the community and the surrounding area?
But then with that, then you're adding the need for a special use. So, I don't know what the statute says. All the statute says is that we can allow test facilities. This language was created to mirror the language for the solar farm portion. So,
So we don't put a sign up or any signage, or is there any type of signage that goes up telling the community that a test wind tower?
no, but that is something that we could include.
That's my suggestion, because I think our community needs some notification of what's coming. Yes.
Comment on that?
It's a good question. But I can pipe in here for a few minutes. I think David and I were just discussing this. We have to treat it as if any other applicant for a building permit, and we should treat them just like any other applicant would be. Whether or not, and I don't know the specifics of what's required for any other building permit, whether you're required to put notices, send notices out, put signs out, or something like that. If not, on others, it's my suggestion that or my opinion, we cannot, for this instance either, you run into a potential equal protection or due process violation if you're treating this group of individuals differently than anybody else who's applying for a building permit. And specifically, I think it's probably consistent with the rest of the changes. We can't be more strict. We can't put in more additional requirements. So my suggestion, or my opinion, is that we probably could not put in any of those.
Well, that's a concern for me, because I would imagine that just the mode of transportation to bring in these giant wind turbines, I mean, you've seen them on the highway. It's just like, whoa, don't get next to that thing, right? You don't want them behind you, and you don't want to be behind them. So given that this could pop up in our community, I think we need to consider that, and possibly if we have to put it in a trailer bill, but the safety.
I was just thinking the same thing. If
Yes,
you wanted to add
exactly.
maybe one more thing to put in that little trailer bill discussion.
So Mark, that's something I would like to incorporate in there, because, you know, it's not like building a house where, you know, you've got some materials coming in. Just transporting this equipment just takes your breath away when you see that thing coming down the road. So, does that sound good, Mark?
Thank you, Ms. Berkowitz. Any other comments on this? We go to a motion in a second. Zoning text amendment to pass.
Do we have to vote on this, or are we just?
Do we vote on this?
Draft.
Yes, you need to vote on this, but I should point out that this particular section was not amended in any way, shape, or form. This is our existing text.
So we're voting on passing the text that we have in front of us.
I'm sorry. I didn't think it was due until, what, May?
We've already had the public hearing.
Is this what you're submitting in May?
Yeah, no, I'm submitting it now. It can be approved now.
I'm saying this is what you're submitting for that deadline. This is what you're.
Yes, it has to be approved by the end of May, but the sooner the better, because they've got cases that need to get, that need to go through.
Well,
We're just passing it to vote on Thursday.
I understand, but what I'm saying is, if this is how, if we're still waiting for perhaps a potential trailer bill and we have until May, and this is what you're gonna submit, why can't we just vote on this in April? And you can submit it in April. If we're still waiting on a trailer bill. I mean,
Oh, I just wanted to point in, the state is opening their solar farm project, basically the old-fashioned community solar block program. June 1st is the first deadline for this year. Last year it was November 1st. So there are solar companies trying to make that deadline with the state. I just want to bring that to the floor.
So you're saying if we don't pass this, we might not be considered for some of those projects?
That is possible, at least within Will County.
Member Berkowitz, did you have a question?
So, Colin, with your comment about
Can you
how
put your mic
this
on,
is-
please?
Sorry. You were saying that this is our existing language here.
Yeah.
So if we want to, if we want to put in that, we would like to have that notification to the community by sign or something like that, does that have to go in a trailer bill, or can we change it?
I would think so, because since this is the existing language, this is what was already in the statute. We just took what was in the statute and plopped it into our ordinance back in 2018.
Okay, great.
You can't make this any different than any other application.
Thank you.
You can't make it harder than what the state has. So I think we're voting to pass this to the full board. We have a motion and a second, do we not?
I don't think so, do we?
Okay, well, looking for a motion.
I don't have a motion.
Okay.
Go ahead and move.
Motion.
All right, we have.
All right,
Coleman,
second.
Second, Newquist.
Previous row.
Previous roll, Berkowitz.
Second.
Second, Dean Schlotman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Last, under other business, repeal of text amendment 20478 to the Chair Quabella.
I'm sorry?
Would you like to shed some light on the repeal of text amendment?
Oh, I think that they should, the land use committee should, the land use department should speak on that.
Okay.
First. Or, I
Anybody
mean,
prepared from land use to comment on this? Oh. Judy Quabella.
I'll tee it up.
Thanks.
We had an email within the past 2 weeks that was forwarded to us that had to deal with prior text amendment 20-478, where the board approved text amendment language for the zoning ordinance, which authorized construction, sales, and services, especially use permit within the A1 zoning district, as well as outdoor storage as a special use permit within the A1 zoning district. The email had identified concerns regarding those text changes and the potential for authorizing incompatible uses within the A1 zoning district. I know there's been other discussions the past month or two with the board just generally about industrial uses and particularly agricultural areas. Colin can kind of give a little history on at least the text amendments that were recently passed within the past couple of years by the board, and then open up for discussion from the committees what direction, if any, they would like us to take.
So, this ordinance was adopted in 2020. The history behind it was that there was a concern that there was an increase in I-1 districts encroaching within the A1 district because the A1 district was not accommodating certain uses, particularly outdoor storage. The review of those cases from 2010 to 2020 showed that there were 10 cases for those 10 years. And they were all sorts of different matter. 2 of them were denied of the 10. But we did notice one pattern, and that was there were 4 similar and consistent uses, which was the landscape business with outdoor storage for excavating equipment, or 2 of those, and construction sales and service, just sales and service, and then another construction sales and service with outdoor equipment storage. Those were the cases that were similar in nature to just the generic landscape business. Landscape business wanting to put their equipment not in a barn necessarily, or in other storage facilities. So the idea was, okay, let's make it more accommodating for these cases. And there was discussion between a map amendment, what does an I-1 district do? And that means that when you say an I-1, everything in that I-1 now becomes available. So instead of creating a new district or encouraging more I-1 within the A1, the idea of creating, expanding the special use permits, because it can identify a unique use, not just a broad spectrum, a specific use. And then does not necessarily change the intensity of the district, and definitely does not change the underlying zoning district whatsoever. So if that special use goes away, the underlying zoning district remains. So the idea was to just change the use table to allow construction sales and service within the A1 as a special use, and then outdoor storage also as a special use. And with that, it also needed some text changes to outdoor storage to include the A1 instead of just limiting it to commercial and industrial. So that is the history behind this text.
And Colin, that's one industrial issue that was the subject of the email that you have sent. What was the other text amendment that was done with regard to removing certain industrial uses from the I-1 zoning district, and then the self-storage facilities? But I think what he just described, though, is the primary issue of discussion for today that was brought up by the email that was sent to board members. But there was also this change as well that was done.
So then the idea is to change, to take out some of the bulk storage type and warehousing items out of the I-1 district and make them specifically to I-2 and I-3. Once again, to protect the A1 encroachment. So the warehousing, this general warehousing, beverage warehousing, and storage and warehousing, wholesale indoor storage. Those were eliminated altogether from the I-1 district. What remained is special uses was parcel package delivery services, the UPS type delivery services, FedEx, and also grain storage, since grain storage is already an A1 permitted use, special use, sorry.
In summary, I think, what the committee needs to discuss, two things, are, excuse me, the first set of changes that were made by the board allowing construction, sales, and service in the A1 zoning district and the outdoor storage in the A1 zoning district as a special use. Does the committee still feel that's appropriate? Does it need to be modified, or does it need to be returned, back to the way it was? So, I mean, you have to decide what's your goal, what do you want to achieve with this? The other issue too is what Colin just described is perhaps, the changes that were made to the I1 zoning district. Are you still okay with those? Do you want to modify them, or do you want to go back to the way it was? So that's kind of, those are the two little buckets that we need to talk about.
So I think the challenge that we have here is we only knew what we knew at the time, right? These are the businesses that have come to us and said, we'd like to do something. Anytime we do that, there's going to be some new scenario, like we saw with the chemical distributor, the Bankston Farm. So I think what we need to do is not necessarily include certain uses, but maybe put certain criteria what's not allowed under this new I2X or I3, whatever we want to call it. We could say you can't operate 24 hours a day. You can't have more than 10 trucks. I mean, I'm just throwing things out there, but I think we need to put some parameters on there that we could just add any business that comes to us with some new use that we haven't thought of. Member Balch?
I don't know if this will help, but we changed 159th Street in Homer Glen from C2 to I1. And there was a development that was going to come in that Homer Glen wanted. They backed off because they said it was industrial. There's other uses. The same thing happened 2 months later in Mokina, because it's the same issue. All these cities have the zoning of C2 or C3 or C, on their properties, and then we say, okay, we want to help this one company to come in and say, all right, now you can build your storage unit here, but we're going to make it I1. Then there's a precedent set for the whole rest of everything to be I1. So now the cities are going to be objecting all the time. I said that at the time. I was in favor of that I1 thing when Rachel was talking about it. It seemed like it made sense. Then after I started thinking about it more, I was against it. And I voted no against it. And I spoke against it. And I was at the Farm Bureau, and I suggested that we go back in time and just put it back the way it was, so that we don't change the zoning classifications and make something like that boat storage that we got part of C2 with a special use permit.
Yeah.
And if we do that, we're not changing this stuff for the cities, because everybody is surrounded by a city, and we're going to be changing the zoning for all these cities, and they're going to come one after another every time this happens, complaining, because these mayors call me up, and I call them up, and I tell them, well, this is what it is, and they're mad. And it's another thing that we screwed up on, but it wasn't on purpose. It's just a consequence that we did not think of. So it's easy to fix. We just revert it back and say, let's go back to the way it was, and then make the storage things a special use. When I was at the Farm Bureau, I think they're in favor of what I just said. And I think that the cities would be in favor of that because it doesn't change their zoning. And if we don't, we're going to have nothing but headaches from everybody for a long time, because it's going to keep coming.
I do think that's the path of least resistance. Staff agrees that we just go back to the way that it used to be. But under what was it?
So I agree that we need to go back, reverse this this change, because it is not appropriate to have those types of businesses in agriculture. That's not agriculture. So if we're going to protect our farmland and our agriculture businesses, those are not the types of businesses that are going to accomplish that. The second thing is there was some discussion in the past when that public storage facility came forward to the board. And those particular public storage facilities, they're everywhere. And they're not industrial. I have one that's a quarter of a mile from my home, and it's not industrial. And nobody even knows it's there. It fits, it blends in. That's more of a commercial use. So I know I recommended this in the past. I think that those public storage facilities that are not for trucking but for residents and people who live in Will County, they should be a commercial use, not an industrial use. And then that way, if we have to rezone a parcel, we're not bringing in industrial. We're specifically addressing a need that's very important out there. In fact, my son just 2 weeks ago just signed a contract for a small storage space because there's no room in our house. So a lot of people use it and a lot of people need it. So it's appropriate to put that in commercial versus industrial. So those are two changes. I think that I'm on board with making those happen.
We already did.
We did?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, that
For
was
the storage?
Yes, that was ordinance 22-258.
Okay, do we have enough information as a committee to make a motion to repeal uses in Section Amendment 20-478? Is that the direction you guys want to go?
I don't know if I have enough information, but one thing that here is that, okay, I understand. I mean, first of all, I really think our I-1 zoning is way broad. I mean, I do think we really need to look at that because it does usher in a lot of other possibilities if we zone someone. I-1, but here, like, we're talking about outdoor storage yards, you know, where that's mostly come up in conjunction with like landscape businesses and things like that. So why would that be so awful to have as a special use in A1? I mean, that's why I'm not sure. I don't know if I personally have enough info. I mean, we could vote to bring it to the full board and, you know, we could potentially table it if the membership feels that we need more info, but I still have a lot of questions.
Sherry, if you go to the industrial parks, you'll see what happens with these types of businesses. There's literally no open area. It's just,
no, exactly.
There's no permeable surfaces, and that's what happens. And then, so it is not compatible with a ad.
I'm not in favor of making everything I-1 zoning. I'm just saying that it might be appropriate in certain instances in an A1, you know, like as a special use. I don't know. That's all I'm saying, that a lot of the outdoor storage yards, a lot of those have been landscape company oriented, at least in my recollection.
Any other comments from the committee here? We do have a comment. Would you like to come to the microphone?
Yes, if I may. Hello, Nathaniel Washburn with KGG LLC. I thank you for allowing me to come up and comment, as I tend to bring a disproportionate number, it seems, of these landscape businesses, warehouses, trucking companies, and self-storage facilities. So I do have a few thoughts on this issue, and while I do think that the proposals today are steps somewhat in the right direction, I do want to offer just a couple of thoughts about what we see from a developer and an attorney side of this. First and foremost, I think it's hard to fit these uses in when we're trying to take generally larger, more rural parcels that are typically A1 ag zone and convert them to landscaping businesses, smaller warehouses. I'm not talking about Amazons, I'm not talking about, Target. I'm talking about things like the Caleb Chemical Project, where it's a smaller use with fewer vehicles. So there's sort of a couple of ways to approach that. One is by keeping the underlying zoning A1 ag, which protects the county in the long run when that user leaves the property, because it will revert back to an agricultural use. The other way is to create newer, more restrictive zoning categories in which the scare factor of what are all them 30, 50 odd uses available in I1 or I2, and creating something like an I1A or an I1B, some sort of smaller, more narrowly defined category that says this is what you can do, and maybe it's a warehouse of less than a certain number of square feet to set it apart from the Amazons and the 500,000 and million square foot buildings. I don't know that there's a perfect solution. I think putting warehousing back in I1, which is a somewhat less intensive use than I2, whereas right now that was the trip up for Caleb Chemical, we were given no alternative but I2 for our use. We would love to have an opportunity to develop it in a I1 or an I1A, or even an A1 with a special use, which I understand there's a concern about how many special uses do you want to pack into A1. But I think from the more rural-minded among the board, having flexibility to keep the underlying property ag, to where if the use is abandoned or if the use is deemed a nuisance and has to be revoked, it's not then an industrial site, it is still an ag site, does have some utility. So I don't know that, to echo Board Member Newquist's concern, I don't know that pulling some of these landscaping businesses with associated storage yards fully out of ag and making them solely a commercial or an industrial endeavor is the most appropriate way to do it. But I do think that there needs to be a more comprehensive approach to some of these issues, and whether that's narrowing the zoning categories or creating additional special uses, I think that would be beneficial to the county, be beneficial to staff, and be beneficial to the people trying to develop in Will County, and not force them to go to communities like Peatone, like Manhattan, like the city of Joliet, to repackage some of these deals in a way that makes more sense, because sometimes the municipality, just by virtue of being a municipality, has more flexibility with their zoning code than the county currently does. And I think giving that flexibility to the county will help encourage development in the county and keep guys like Caleb Chemical and some of these landscapers in the county and being more beneficial and contributing members to the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Comments from the committee? Chair Bella?
Right, so you guys, what I wanted to do, and you don't have to vote on this today, I wanted to have this to start the conversation, because I didn't like when we took warehousing out of I2, then threw us into that situation. I'm sorry, I1, and it threw us into a situation, now we have to put I2 places, which were completely bad. I think we should really look at I1, because I agree with Sherry, and maybe we make an I1 light or whatever new thing, and do that. And also, I think there's certain things that totally could work in an A1. That way we preserve agriculture, and it could be a special use that we don't allow to be transferred. Maybe the landscaping, because that's kind of different, you know what I mean? If I've developed my property for landscaping and somebody wants to buy a landscaping business, that would be, something we could consider. Again, on a case-by-case basis, with the special use permit, you get to put those restrictions on. So I think it's important to have this conversation start. Because as Steve and I, our motto for the county board is fix where we live. Look at what isn't working and make it better. So I'm not asking you guys today to go ahead and vote on this because it is new. And Colin, I'd like to have the chart that you have that's not attached to the agenda, so we can look at that. Where you have a little chart with A1, C1, C2, whatever, little S's and P's there and there, so we can see that. We don't have that on ours, I didn't see it on mine.
No, because I didn't know where this was going, so.
But it'd be good for us to have that so we can talk about it in our committees, because we can talk about it at caucus. The committee themselves, they can call each other and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? It's a whole new group of people, but I really think that we need to find a solution, because the storage yard that was put into like Steve's area, it had to go in as an
I-1.
an I-1.
Should have been left alone as C2.
You know, the nice thing with that facility is it's not intrusive at all, right? But now that that property is zoned I-1, and then, like Sherry said, all those other things that you can do in I-1, now you can do in their property, it changes the whole area. So we want to kind of look at what can we do to protect an area, but allow something like the Caleb Chemical out by in Peatone Township. The people are not opposed to it, they just don't want an I-2. So since there are warehouses there, actually pole barns, you know, that the Bankston Tree Farm used as part of theirs, so that worked good for this Caleb Chemical, but it's not really intrusive, they don't have a lot of use. And you can say, not to exceed so many trucks, not to exceed the hours, you know, Caleb is looking to work 9 to 5. Well, that's much better than having somebody next to you who's operating 24 hours. So I think this is actually a great example for you guys to work on, because it'll make you think a lot about what we do in the county, where we want to go in the county, what we want to allow to make things better so people can come and do things, but still protect the residents next door. Because you know, the people in the area said they would rather have Caleb Chemical there than Amazon. Well, not understanding, you know, if you put it in an I-2 category, you're open to so much more if Caleb Chemical sells that property. And then it opens the door to Bankston to sell the rest of the tree farm as an I-2. That would be very detrimental to the ag area. So that's really what I think the conversation should be. And I appreciate you having your comments shared, because it's true, it's a new thing. And we really should do something more communicating amongst ourselves. So when we did that last change, I don't think there was a lot of communication. I had asked for a different type of zoning classification that we could do things in, and all of a sudden it was just taking out warehousing out of I-1. So we have the ability, you guys are all new, it's great because you think differently. You're not set in stone the way the old board was. So if you guys will take the time, discuss, you know, ask more questions of our staff. They deal with this all the day, perhaps call an attorney or two, get their input, and then come to, I know Cass Wendland was another person that had some concerns, you know him, Frankie, right? So he's another attorney who deals with these things and had come to me, approached me on something. That's what I would like us to see. So granted, we may not get this passed for several months, and I think that's good. I think it's good to take the time, do the research, have the conversations here, have the conversations at your caucuses, and see where we want to go with this. Because I, for one, want to make it a friendlier place to live and work, but also make sure we're protecting the rights of the community, of the agricultural area and such like that. So that's my intent with this and this thought. They did what they were asked to do, so now you have something to think about, okay? You can just move it forward to the next month and have the conversations in between and say, no, we'd really rather not do this, we'd really rather do that. And if you guys come up with that, you bring it to us because you guys have talked about it, you bring it to the rest of the board, we'll be inclined to agree because you guys have done your homework. So that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And
I just want to let everybody know that the gentleman on 159th Street, he said that if we change the zoning back to C2, he has no problem with it. So he's willing to go back and be C2. So that shows you that even the people that are doing this stuff are willing to work with the county because they want what's best for where they're at. They don't want I where they're at either,
Right.
even though they are I.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you for your comments, Chair O'Donnell. I just want to make sure that we keep this on the burner here. Make sure that we don't let too many months go by without doing something. So my challenge to the committee is to make sure that we're reaching out to the people that can answer our questions. Let's make sure they're in this room at the next meeting so that they can speak to us and that we're continuing to advance this conversation. So, any other questions from the Mitchell?
Just as something to consider as we go through this discussion, it's going to be, it's going to be difficult. So we're either going to make a new classification, or we just go with the special, go back and then go with the special use permit. I kind of inclined to go there, because if it's already, because in Dallas district, it's, commercial zoning. In Judy's district, it may be ag zoning. So we want to have a warehouse or whatever it is that may have fallen under the I-2. In either one of those areas, it's going to be different. So I think the special use permit offers more flexibility. That's all I'm saying. And that's something to consider as we go forward. That's all.
Any other comments from the committee? So to do that, if I'm not mistaken, it would be as simple as repealing the text amendment 2478, could go back to the original way, and we could still have this conversation on changing, creating new classifications, correct? Yeah. So we're, Colin,
The idea of creating a new classification the staff recommendation would be to wait until after the land resource management plan update has been done, because we do not have a policy in which to base the ordinance language on.
So when will that be?
Oh, as soon as we can start, because I gave you guys some homework last month. You had a little chart. If you still have that little chart, I'll be glad to take it. This is one of those issues that's on the chart that I've received from other places. So this is an issue that's not going to go away quickly, and the idea of creating policy through an ordinance kind of puts you in a bad spot. So if we can get now that's with regard to the new district. Applying it to special uses, that's easily done. So that's not an issue, but it's the new district that is complicated, since we do not have a policy on a new district.
So, I mean, it's on the agenda, we can't vote on repealing this.
No.
But do you want to do that?
If we repeal it, then what do we do in its place?
It goes
It goes back to creating special.
But that wasn't working either.
And then we create something.
And then we create a special use.
The question is, was it
We
working
did.
better? Was it working better than what we created?
I mean, we basically created this back in 2020 because we had so many situations where the only recourse there were limited uses. I mean, C2 would have been more appropriate, or C1, but our zoning doesn't allow it. Our zoning only allowed these types of uses in, like I1 or I2 or A1 with a special use permit, correct?
I'm sorry, I was looking I didn't hear your first part.
I was saying that we did this whole thing in adding the special use permit because we had so many of these situations where the only, according to our zoning, it would have had to be I1 or I2.
Now the question is, so many, 10 in 10 years.
Right. It seems like since I've been on the board, we've done like 3 or 4 of them maybe. I mean, haven't more of them been recent?
Four, okay.
We did 4 of them?
Hey, Judy, please turn that microphone on for you.
So what's the downside of leaving this as a special use until we're able to make it right? I agree this isn't ideal and it should be fixed, but what is the downside of leaving it this way until we are able to fix it?
You have the ability to say no. And that seems to be the key to most of these ordinance changes, is the board does not want to say no.
But we can say no to the special use.
Exactly. But this is, yes, exactly. This is giving people, people don't want to say no. Okay, It's the transfer from A1 to I1. And you don't want to say no to that, but you're going to have to because I1's a little too much. So that's why why this was created, so you'd be able to say yes in very specific circumstances.
Right, so what's the downside of leaving it that way until we fix this? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, then,
Is there a downside?
no.
Okay, so why are we gonna repeal it until we fix it?
David,
What I would recommend is that the committee should do this, perhaps at the next committee meeting, we can come back and call staff here. From what we've heard is, what would it look like, and we can talk through the I-1 uses, that if they were restored back to I-1 once they were taken out, which we could walk through those and see if that's something we want to consider as putting back in I-1. And then with regard to the other, which is on the screen, with the construction, sales, and service, the outdoor storage, it seems like some of the concerns, like particularly the email that we got this past week, was the intensity of some of the potential uses. Maybe we could look at this and come back and we can have a discussion that if you're going to allow the special uses to remain in the A1 zoning district, well, perhaps it's not this. Maybe it's something a little bit different where you get a little bit more specific about what you might allow as a special use. Maybe less intense things. Maybe, as Nate had mentioned, maybe looking at some square footage of certain buildings and certain types of uses. And we can have a discussion about this and then decide what direction we'll have.
yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so Sherry, I wasn't on the land use committee, however, I attended all of the meetings. And this change was encouraged, quite frankly, by board member Rachel Ventura. And that eventually led to this change. And I don't recall, like Colin said, that there were many issues in that particular situation that we were having. But now that the change has been made and we're seeing the consequences of those changes, again, I believe we need to correct that. Go ahead.
The question then becomes, what changes have you seen? Because there's only been